For the last 10 months, T1, the League of Legends World Champions, have been getting attacked.
플레이오프를 준비하는 과정에서 다른 팀들은 연습을 할 수 있는 데 반해서 저희는 솔로 랭크 연습을 하지 못하기 때문에
They can't practice, they can't stream, and they've lost out on millions of dollars because of it. Now, Riot are offering a $100,000 bounty for anyone who can fix the problem for them. But the question is, why? For the last year, I've been trying to wrap my head around it all. I released a video about it, and then afterwards, the creator of the DDoS tool hunted me down on Discord to chat. So what's going on, and why are T1 the only team being targeted? It's time to investigate. So this all started a year ago, but how do these attacks even work? Imagine you're standing in front of a vault. As far as you can tell, it's impenetrable. Inside of this vault is an IP address. It's sort of like your home address, except it's the digital address for your internet connection. Finding this address is typically the hardest part of a DDoS attack. Not only because most of the time they're pretty well guarded, but also because they're dynamic. This means that every week or so, they'll rotate to a new address. Even if you broke into the vault last week, you'll have to break into it again this week. However, if an entire team is sharing this one IP address, it introduces a tempting vector of attack no matter how difficult it may be. So let's assume that Riot Korea has patched all the flaws in their client and that no one in T1 has had their system compromised in any way. What would the next step be for a hacker who wanted to break into the vault? The one constant variable that all the team members of T1 share is that they all play, stream, and scrim at T1 headquarters in Gangnam, South Korea. This makes things a little bit easier for an attacker because they only need to find one IP address. The prevailing theory is that the anti-cheat specific to the Korean server had a vulnerability that could be exploited. But as we'll come to learn, that might not be the case. Once the attacker discovered the IP address, they had everything they needed to not just attack one player, but the entire T1 infrastructure. Given that this has been an unrelenting problem for the last year, the dedication of whoever's behind this seems clear, although the motivation, not so much. But there was a tweet from Riot Medler, the head of League of Legends, where he stated, "We've been working with T1 for months now, and we've addressed a number of issues that had resulted in prior attacks on their HQ. These recent incidents, however, are different from those earlier attacks, and as a result are not addressed by the fixes that we put in place. Since these latest attacks started, we've had a team investigating what's causing these latest problems, and we're in ongoing discussion with T1 on other ways to mitigate these attacks." The upgrades put in place made it so that T1 themselves couldn't be attacked anymore. That is, at least directly. But a new method wasted no time in showing itself, and the fix raised more questions than it answered. Why are T1 the only team affected? And why are Riot offering a $100,000 bounty for anyone who discovers a vulnerability that specifically leads to DDoSing? And why have Riot Korea allegedly said they don't want the DDoSing tool shut down at all? So how does this mysterious tool work? Through a fair bit of research and articles that were only originally published in Korean, we can pinpoint it down to a couple of things. There was, at least at some point, a vulnerability in League's code. This vulnerability allowed a player's IP address to be discovered purely based off their summoner name. What's more, this attack only seemed to affect people playing on the Korean servers. We could see this when a Korean streamer who was being DDoSed, Kim Min Kyo, switched to the Chinese server temporarily and it fixed all of his problems. The only visible difference between the Korean League client and the rest of the world is that they had their own separate anti-cheat called Demacia. It seems possible that when League's source code was stolen, it exposed a weakness to be exploited, especially given that when Demacia flagged someone as a possible cheater, this was the information that was sent off. The current date, the player's username, the suspected hack tool, and their IP address. All of this information was sent off to Riot. This exploit was then made into a tool called Swissknife. People could pay Swissknife to pull an IP of whoever they wanted, and the entire thing was all run out of an extremely secure Discord server. We'll go more into this later, but just remember it for now because it will be important. Once this IP address is located, a network of compromised computers is used to send a flood of traffic to the victim. This is more commonly referred to as a botnet. Creating your own botnet is hard, so the more common option is to just buy one. They typically start at around $99. You might be thinking, $99 is pretty expensive. In fact, it's 99 times more expensive than my Patreon for comparison. Except when you sign up to my Patreon, you get early access to these videos without ads, and you get your name personally thanked at the end of each upload. Plus you get to know that you personally are what's allowing me to continue creating this content for you. So if you enjoy my videos and you want to support future videos, the link is in the description. So all of this seemingly explains why the exploit is only affecting the Korean server, but then something happened that really threw me off track. The entire T1 roster got DDoSed again, but this time they weren't in Korea. Later, Faker mentioned this incident in an interview.
이번에 좀 월드에서 노멀 게임 10판 안 하면 랭크를 못 하더라고요. 그래서 하고 있는데 뭐 패배했던 거는 인터넷이 끊겨서 패배했던 것 같습니다.
It's unknown at this point whether or not this is connected to the rest of the attacks, but it does seem unlikely given how every other incident has been confined to the Korean server. It's not completely disproven, but it is just something to keep in the back of your mind for now. But then, after ignoring the problem for most of the year, Riot started offering people $100,000 if they could solve the issue. Imagine yourself in the hacker's shoes. You've just found a zero-day exploit. A zero-day exploit or a zero-day vulnerability is an unknown exploit in the wild that exposes a vulnerability in a software or hardware, and it can create complicated problems well before anyone realizes anything's wrong. A zero-day exploit leaves no opportunity for detection when it's used, which is exactly where it gets its name from. You have a couple of options. You can turn this into the company and they can fix it. Or you could try your hand at the black market and make millions. Well, potentially, you could also just go to jail. This left companies with a bit of an issue. If someone found an exploit in a program or a company's code, they had no reason to turn it in. So they came up with a solution. This led to the introduction of bug bounties. Companies began to offer large amounts of money for anyone who could turn in an exploit. If you were a hacker, this was an opportunity to switch sides. Turn in your findings to the company and make some money while you're at it. Plus, you get to live out the rest of your life without constantly looking over your shoulder. Nearly a year after T1 got hit offline for the first time, Riot started offering one of these bounties. This is a website called HackerOne. It's one of the main platforms that bounty hunters will go to find new jobs. And for some people, it really is a full-time job. If you discover a flaw in the defenses of a big company, they'll reward you handsomely. For example, this is Riot's page on HackerOne. They've just added 3 new bounty opportunities, all of them related to DDoSing. Non-traffic volume based denial of service, DDoS that can identify and target individual players, and targeted in-game session disconnection. These all have their own individual examples, as you can see here, and rewards that go all the way up to $100,000. So what does this mean? And is $100,000 enough to fix an issue of this magnitude? Let's put things into perspective here. There was a developer who single-handedly managed to reduce the GTA Online loading time from an average of between 3 to 10 minutes to under 2 minutes. This was a really big problem for the game at the time. And for his work, Rockstar awarded him with $10,000. For a big company that's outside of the gaming space, like PayPal, for example, the average payout is between $1,000 and $3,000, with the most critical exploits receiving between $20,000 and $30,000. So yeah, this is a really big bounty. But the very fact that Riot created this bounty raises some really interesting questions. Everything we know about this DDoSing tool, Swissknife, has come from screenshots and leaked information posted on Korean forums. There was a name that kept popping up, and before I released my last video, I tried to add them on Discord to see if we could get a comment. Obviously, if you've watched the last video on this topic that I did, then you would probably know that we didn't end up getting a comment before the video came out. But shortly after I released that video, someone within their team contacted me. Before I dive into that though, I need to make something clear. It's important that when we're talking about sensitive situations like this, that everything just remains a theory until there is some sort of hard proof. Because right now, no one can really be 100% sure of what's going on apart from T1 and maybe Riot, and probably not even them because the issue isn't fixed yet. So this raises a question. What's the reason for someone reaching out from their team? They could have ulterior motives or some other way to benefit from the information that they share with me, and it could not even be true. Especially given that whoever the attacker is seems to enjoy making Riot look a bit silly. Here's part of the message that I got sent. Quote, "We had already been in contact with a Riot employee. We intended our service to be used by our users in their own games, not against streamers or pros. We offered to shut down the API if they desired, but they declined. Later on, they tried to sneak into our service, so we stopped talking and blocked them." So what does all of this mean? If this is true, then there's a chance that the people carrying out the DDoSes now are not even the same people that started them initially. There is one more part of this to cover though. The majority of these DDoS attacks took place before the introduction of Vanguard. This is back when nearly every single major streamer was getting attacked, even the LCK got hit offline, and no one on T1 could stream at all. Flash forward to the present day though, after the implementation of Vanguard, there still seems to be a way to exploit the client to find IP addresses. But the only team being affected now is T1. This lines up with the other part of the message I received, where the creator states that Demacia had already been disabled in the lead up to Vanguard's release, meaning that the exploit most likely has nothing to do with it, contrary to leaks and prevailing opinion on Korean forums. Less than a week after Riot started offering this $100,000 bounty, the new T1 top laner, Doran, got DDoSed.
와 심하네.
This began straight away after he joined T1 in late November. Doran himself wasn't being directly targeted. Instead, it was his teammates, as had mostly been the case since T1 upped their defenses. Despite everything, it looks like T1 are going to try to brute force their way through the attacks and just stream regardless, which is understandable given how much money they lost by not being able to stream for most of 2024. Esports teams already have a hard enough time becoming profitable, and T1 were actually projected to turn a profit for 2024. That is, at least until the attacks started. T1 has stated that now they have made upgrades to their facility, which protects them from being DDoSed. An upgrade like this can sometimes be as simple as increasing the capacity of your internet. Here's an example of how Riot does it with their own servers. Here's the actual data of when the Riot servers were victims of a DDoS attack. Instead of the main server taking the full amount of force, it's evenly spread throughout all of their servers, allowing it to be effectively soaked. But back to T1 for a second.
Even with all the DDoS stuff, where we lost a ton of money because I prioritized not having their mental boom because of not being able to stream. Super frustrating that we're the only team targeted in this. LCK and Riot are like, well, like they can't stream. So like all that streaming income that they lost out on because of the inability to solve DDoS. And here we are in December, you know?
Yeah, still same problem.
Still sitting here like, hey, when's DDoS gonna be solved? Yeah, great question.
Was that
hopefully someone like wins the bounty.
Interestingly enough, the Korean government is actually starting to crack down on cyber attacks since they've seen a big uptick around the country in the past year. On November 28, the South Korean police arrested the CEO and 5 employees for manufacturing over 240,000 satellite receivers, preloaded to include DDoS attack functionality at a purchaser's request. This functionality was allegedly needed because one of their competitors was DDoSing them, and they wanted to counter it. Given the recent developments in this case, perhaps a solve is on the horizon. However, it's hard to ignore the disheartening truth that if an entire team of professionals at Riot Korea can't solve it with all of their resources and intel, how can someone from the community without any of that hope to stand a chance? Hopefully, for the sake of T1, someone can solve the mystery and bring home the bounty. But maybe the attacks won't stop, and they'll have to make yet another miracle run against all odds if they want to win Worlds in 2025. Only time will tell.